Hello everyone, welcome back to Coach Craig's Sports. Today is Tuesday, so it's going to be our waiver wire episode. And we're going to be going over some people to pick up this week that are under 50% owned in ESPN and Yahoo for the most part. And these are going to be guys at the quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight end, and defenses to stream this week. But without further ado, we'll get started at looking at our quarterbacks. So first off, we got Derek Carr. He was 15 out of 24, 112 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions, 41 yards rushing, 14.58 fantasy points. This is going to be 6 point per passing touchdown leagues. Not the greatest number this past week, but he was playing in a game that had very poor weather, so that really affected his performance. He has a pretty decent matchup this week against the Chargers. The Chargers did give up 3 passing touchdowns to Drew Lock last week, so it could be a matchup Derek Carr takes advantage of. Obviously, weather's not going to play a factor in this one. He's owned in 48% of ESPN leagues, 42% of Yahoo leagues, so it's a 50-50 chance to see if he's out there. If you're in a league and you need a quarterback, maybe he gets dropped after his poor performance last week, or if somebody was just using him for a 1 week rental. Then next up we got Kirk Cousins, 11 out of 14, 160 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions, 12.4 fantasy points. Not the greatest fantasy day overall, obviously only threw the ball 14 times. He's only owned in 15% of ESPN leagues, 28% of Yahoo leagues. He goes against Detroit this week, who gave up 3 passing touchdowns to Phillip Rivers, so obviously it's a good matchup for him. It's obviously a good matchup for Dalvin Cook as well. Lions defense isn't the greatest, even though they had played better 2 weeks in a row up until last week. So it's definitely a matchup that could turn into a shootout like some of these Vikings and Lions games have done in the past. If that happens, Kirk Cousins could definitely be a very good streamable quarterback option this week. Next up, we got Drew Lock. Drew Lock was 26 out of 41, 248 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, -1 yard rushing, 25.82 fantasy points. So a very good day for him overall. Kind of came out of nowhere, honestly. This week he could get wide receiver Tim Patrick back. That could help him out a little bit more as well. He's only owned in 5% of ESPN leagues, 10% of Yahoo leagues, and he goes against the Atlanta Falcons' poorest defense this week. So it's definitely a matchup that you could stream him in if you want to. We'll move over to running backs. There's quite a few running back names on here, but most of these guys should probably be owned already. But if they're not in your league, definitely check them out. So first off, I got Zack Moss, played on 53% of the snaps, 14 for 81 yards, 2 touchdowns, 20.1 fantasy points, owned in 36% of ESPN leagues. Somehow he actually went down in ESPN ownership last week. I'm not sure how. I said he was a guy that you really need to grab, especially going in last week against the Patriots defense. 55% in Yahoo. He goes against Seattle in week 9, so pretty good matchup for him once again. If they're able to control the ball early, kind of keep Russell Wilson and company off the field, could be another good game for Zack Moss. And with that being said, Zack Moss is a guy that could have a lot of value going forward in the future. We'll talk about some fab bids. So Moss to me is like a 15% to 20% of your fab bid. I think he's going to be the guy in Buffalo down the stretch, and he definitely has fantasy value. The quarterbacks we mentioned, they're all pretty much like upwards of 3% of your fantasy budget at the most. None of them are like guys that you need to have. Cousins and Lock are more of streaming candidates for this week. Carr you could probably play in most of the matchups this year and not hurt you. Next up we got J.K. Dobbins. He played on 66% of snaps, 15 carries, 113 yards, 2 targets, caught one of them for 8 yards, 13.1 fantasy points. This is in PPR scoring format. If you're not using PPR scoring format, just adjust accordingly. He's just under the 50% threshold in ESPN and 68% on Yahoo. Honestly, I'm not sure how he was under 50%, especially with Mark Ingram missing last week. But if he's out there in your league, definitely a guy you can go out and grab. Could have a lot of value coming down the stretch as well. Plays against the Colts defense this week. That's very good against the run. So just tamper your expectations for him this week. He's probably, a 10 to 15% of your fab budget type of guy. We'll have to see what it looks like when Ingram does come back, if he's involved still, or if it's just Dobbins and Edwards going forward. Then we'll talk about Gus Edwards. Played on the 32% of the snaps. Not the greatest snap percentage in the world. 16 carries for 87 yards, 1 touchdown, 14.7 fantasy points. So he's definitely going to be involved in the offense. He's their downhill runner. He's going against that same poor matchup against the Colts. He's owned in 5% of ESPN leagues, 30% of Yahoo leagues. So there's a decent chance he's out there. He's probably like a 5 to 10% of your fab budget type of guy. Obviously, Mark Ingram will be back at some point, but we'll have to see how that affects their backfield going forward. Then we have JaMycal Hasty, and honestly, he's not somebody I'm excited about, but he has opportunity ahead of him right now. Played on 41% of the snaps, 12 carries for 29 yards, 1 touchdown. 1 target for 1 reception and 2 yards. He had 10.1 fantasy points. Literally all his fantasy points came from that touchdown. Otherwise, he was completely useless. Owned in 46% of ESPN leagues, 42% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against the Green Bay Packers this week, so it's definitely a good matchup. I expect him and McKinnon to kind of split snaps. It looks like Coleman's going to miss in this one, and all their other running backs are still on IR. So this is more of a case of opportunity than actually a player's talent. And I don't think he's a long-term value here. Raheem Mostert will be back at some point soon. So I don't think Hasty is a guy that you want to spend a bulk load of your fab budget. If you need a guy to start for like 1 week, you could probably spend 5% of your fab budget if he's out there. Then we have Jordan Wilkins, played on 51% of snaps, 20 carries for 89 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 target, 1 reception for 24 yards, 20.3 fantasy points. He's only owned in 0.5% of ESPN leagues, 3% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against a tough Baltimore Ravens defense in Week 9. So not the best matchup in the world for him. But Jonathan Taylor does have an ankle injury. We'll have to see how long that sidelines him or limits him. If he's out for any period of time, Wilkins definitely has some value, especially in a run-heavy offense. So he's a guy that you could probably spend 3 to 5% of your fab budget on. Don't go too crazy on him because we don't know what Taylor's status is yet. Then we have Damien Harris. Damien Harris played on 31% of snaps, 16 carries, 102 yards, 1 touchdown, 16.2 fantasy points. He's owned in 31% of ESPN leagues, 47% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against the Jets this week, so a very, very good matchup. He's a guy that this week you can pick up and play. I'm not sure how long his future value is going to last. Obviously, the 31% of snaps is a little bit concerning. Sony Michel will be back at some point, so we'll have to see if that affects Harris's playing time and value going forward as well. But for this week, you could probably spend 5 to 8% of your fab budget on him and be able to throw him in right away. Then we'll move over to the wide receiver position. Wide receiver position this week is pretty bad, honestly, for waivers. First off, we have Corey Davis, 79% of snaps, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 128 yards, 1 touchdown. So this is back-to-back weeks that he's received 10 targets. Definitely a good sign for him. He's a guy that you can pick up. You could probably play right away. 26.8 fantasy points this previous week. 37% owned in ESPN, 48% in Yahoo. Should be a lot higher than that. He's obviously put up good numbers throughout the season. He's definitely a guy that you can pick up and play. Goes against Chicago in Week 9, so not the best matchup in the world, but not the worst. If they shadow A.J. Brown with Fuller, could be a good matchup for Corey Davis. Then one of my other favorite guys, I didn't mention him as much last week. I've been talking about him for a little while. I had him out on Twitter that I thought he was going to have a good game. Is Jakobi Meyers for the Patriots. Played on 98% of the snaps last week, so pretty much every play. 10 targets, 6 receptions for 58 yards. He led the Patriots in all those categories. 13.8 fantasy points. He's only owned in pretty much 1% of leagues. He goes against the Jets in Week 9, so it's definitely a good matchup for him. And if he continues to be Cam Newton's favorite target, if N'Keal Harry doesn't play in this game, he's definitely somebody you could roll out if you need to. Then I'll mention Jalen Reagor, returned from IR, played 73% of snaps, saw 6 targets, 3 receptions. He had 16 yards, 1 touchdown, and then he had a carry for 6 yards as well. 13.2 fantasy points, so not a bad day overall. Owned in 14% of ESPN leagues, 24% of Yahoo leagues. He does have a bye in Week 9, though, so I'm not as excited about him. Alshon Jeffery could be back as well, and it could limit some of his value, but he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. If you're trying to pick him up, if you got an extra bench spot and you want to stash him, he's probably a 3 to 5% of your fab budget type of guy. Then we got Mecole Hardman. I'm not crazy about picking him up, but you can't ignore what he did last week. He played on 68% of snaps. I believe was the most this season for him. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 96 yards, 1 touchdown. I believe that 9 targets is a career high for him as well. So if he's getting more involved in this offense, he could be worth a pickup. 22.6 fantasy points, and he's owned in 27% of ESPN leagues, 30% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against the Panthers this week, so it's definitely a good matchup for him. But he's like another guy that's probably a 3 to 5% of your fab budget type of guy. Then we have Alshon Jeffery. Still hasn't played yet this year. 10% owned in ESPN, 13% owned in Yahoo. Has a bye this week. Hopefully he comes back in Week 10 after that bye. But he's probably another bench stash guy. At this point, if he's out there, you probably just want to spend 1 to 2% of your fab budget on him. Then we'll move over to tight end position. First off, my favorite one of the week probably is Logan Thomas. Played on 78% of snaps last time he played. He had a bye week last week. 4 targets, 4 receptions, 60 yards, 1 touchdown, 16 fantasy points. He's owned in 8% of ESPN leagues, 23% of Yahoo leagues. His ownership rate did drop a little bit last week since he was on a bye. Goes against the Giants this week, so not a bad matchup overall. He's definitely a guy if you need a tight end to pick up. If you have George Kittle, that's probably going to miss the rest of the year. Logan Thomas is definitely somebody to consider. Probably like a 5% of your fab budget type of guy. Like I said, George Kittle is going to miss most of the year, if not all of the year. So we're going to talk about Ross Dwelley and Jordan Reed in this one. I'm going to start off with Dwelley just because he's the guy that played last week. He played on 56% of the snaps. Kittle was out there for about 66, so that was before his injury. And Dwelley had 4 targets, 1 reception, 16 yards, and a touchdown, 8.6 fantasy points. He's literally unowned. They go against Green Bay this week in Week 9, who hasn't been too good against the tight end overall. Nick Mullins does like to throw the tight end, and he's going to be starting at quarterback. So it could be a good matchup for him. Same thing applies to Jordan Reed if he would play in this game. He's owned in 1.6% of ESPN leagues, 3% of Yahoo leagues. They do play on Thursday night, so I do not expect Reed to come back until next week, though. If you're going out there and you want to play one of these two guys, maybe you go out, you pick Jordan Reed up. You probably don't even have to spend like 2% of your fab budget on him. So you pick him up, you see if he's going to play. If he's not going to play on Thursday, then you can pivot, drop him, and pick up Dwelley, because I don't think a lot of people are going to be on the Dwelley train. Obviously, if you're watching this video, maybe you are. But whoever's the tight end this week against Green Bay should have a good week. So if you're a tight end need team, if you're someone that lost Kittle, your tight end's on a bye this week, one of these two options is viable as a streamer this week. Just have to see which one it ends up being. Last but not least, at the tight end position, we have Austin Hooper. He's on a bye this week, didn't play the last 2 weeks due to having his appendix removed. And he's owned in 46% of ESPN leagues, 39% of Yahoo leagues. There's a good chance he's out there. And maybe this is a guy that gets dropped over his bye week because people need to pick up another tight end. They might have already dropped him, though, honestly. If they were already holding on to him, they're probably not going to drop him at this point. We'll just have to see, honestly, because Hooper was seeing targets. Obviously, Odell Beckham Jr. is out now. So I think Hooper's somebody you can play the rest of the season as a decent low-end tight end one. And then last but not least, we have the defenses to consider for Week 9. So I'm going to start out with the Washington football team. They go against the New York Giants this week. Daniel Jones turned the ball over quite a bit this year. And Washington's defense is owned in 18% of ESPN leagues, 17% of Yahoo leagues. So there's a good chance they're out there, honestly. Like I've said in my past videos, these defenses that you're streaming week to week, you don't want to spend over like 3% of your fab budget on. So just keep that in mind. Arizona's a good one this week, honestly. They are owned in 15% of ESPN leagues, 14% of Yahoo leagues. They go against the Miami Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa is making his second career start. He wasn't too special against the Rams last week. The Miami Dolphins defense and special teams essentially won him that game. So we'll have to see how he looks this week, but I think Arizona is definitely have a decent matchup in this one. Then a low streamer potential pick is the Houston Texans defense. They're owned in 2% of ESPN leagues, 5% of Yahoo leagues. I know they've been god-awful this year. I'm a Texans fan, and it hasn't been pretty. But they go against Jacksonville in Week 9. They did put up some decent numbers against Jacksonville the last time they played, and that was with Gardner Minshew. This week it's going to be Jake Luton, rookie 6th-round quarterback. And this is his first career NFL start, so it could be a little rough for him. It could be a matchup that the Texans take advantage of, especially in this one. Jacksonville will probably lean on the run with James Robinson quite a bit. But if we're able to stop the run, they definitely have a decent chance to put up some points in this one. But with that being said, that's all I got for waiver wire picks for this week. Like I said, probably not the greatest week overall. The running back position is pretty decent. But some of the higher end guys there are probably already owned if you're in a competitive league or a deeper league. If there's anyone else you guys think I should have mentioned on waivers this week, just feel free to leave it down in the comments below. If you have any questions about waivers, who you should pick up, who you should drop based on your team, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's in the comments, at my email, coachcraigsports@gmail.com, on Twitter, @CoachCraigSport, or on the Coach Craig Sports Facebook page. If you guys liked and enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, and that's one about you, the viewer, and trying to help you succeed, especially in your fantasy football team, helping you to enjoy fantasy football overall, and bring some championships to your mantles. With that being said, if you're a new or current subscriber is yet to do so, also hit that notification bell. It lets you know every single time that I post up a video. Like I've been saying, post up about 5 videos a week, Monday through Friday. Sometimes we'll throw in one on the weekend as well. I would also appreciate it if you checked out some of my articles on the Podcastic Network. Do ones about snap rate percentage, mainly throughout the season. And then we do start sits on Wednesday as well. There's a link in the description down to their website. My best friend and I recently started a podcast. It's called the 2 Point Podcast. I have the link down to that in the description below. We are talking about previews for matchups and recaps so far for each week in the NFL season. But with that being said, that's all we got for this video. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed. Hopefully gave you a little bit of insight for waivers this week. And have a great rest of your day.